Welcome to the Leading by History podcast, where we take a thoughtful journey with our listeners, exploring the past, uncovering powerful narratives, and highlighting the knowledge essential to transforming our world, one episode at a time. Walk with us through history, guided by your host, that's me, Dr. Masiyahu Israel, and we look forward to growing with you each step of the way. Welcome to Leading by History. All right. So we are in season 6 of the Leading by History podcast, 6 seasons going strong. And we are so excited to be with you all today. I've got a special guest with us to set off our new season, and I'm just excited. Look, we have been since 2017, setting up the Leading by History Collective and working to bridge the gap between K-12 education and higher ed. And over these last several years, we've built quite a following. A lot of you continue to listen and subscribe. We've been on sabbatical for about the last 7 months or so, as I've been working on other projects and attending to expand the work of Leading by History into other areas. And we wanted to come back in our 6th season to really start off strong, to get the historians and the educators and the activists in our community and around the United States back on board again. So I look forward to the lineup that we're going to have. And today we have Mr. Marland Buckner, who is the CEO of the Shockoe Institute, where they learn, reflect, and act. And we want to just welcome Mr. Buckner to the platform. Welcome to Leading by History.
Thank you so very much. It's just a real pleasure and gift to be with you today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us. I'm just so excited to get some conversation with you today and to talk about the Shockoe Institute. You know, that area in Richmond is an area that is filled with history. It's filled with pain, but it's also filled with motivation. It's also filled with inspiration and vibrancy. And so we want to talk about the work, but we want to start off by letting our listeners know a little bit about you. You know, we've got 11,000 folks in listens that potentially tune in to our show. And, you know, a lot of times we bring folks on and they may be very well known in the areas where they do most of their work. But then we have folks as far away as Germany, the Netherlands, Canada, who tune in and they say, you know, I'm not quite sure. So if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself, you know, about how you came about in doing this work, and what brought you to the presidency and the CEO-ship, if you will, of the Shockoe Institute.
Well, thank you again, and I'm delighted to learn that you've got really a global audience, because that immediately that triggers for me a wonderful opportunity in the conversation that we're about to have. So just a little bit of background about me. I was born in Los Angeles. I grew up and was educated in Canada, in the Canadian prairies, where I did my undergraduate and my first bit of graduate work. And I came back down to the United States, to Virginia, in the early 1990s. I was where I started my doctoral work at William and Mary, and that's really where this story begins 30 plus years ago. I had the opportunity, as I said, to begin my PhD work there, much to the chagrin of my late mother. I did not finish my dissertation, so I am not, unlike yourself, I am not a doctor. But I went a good long way down that road, and I completed my doctoral exams and began writing my dissertation. It was that same time that I had the opportunity. I had a particularly interesting job opportunity in Washington, D.C. And as often happens, when you get to D.C., as I did by the mid 1990s, you don't leave. So I left my academic roots, went into government. I worked on Capitol Hill and in a couple of think tanks. I was worked for Senator Schumer right after he was elected to the Senate, and I was a chief of staff to Harold Ford Jr. in the House of Representatives. From Capitol Hill, I went, as they say, I went downtown, and I worked then at Microsoft. I was in the technology sector, and I spent a lot of time at Microsoft working on human capital issues and different parts of the innovation ecosystem. And that really was wonderful. That was my business school training, if you will, being able to work at a company like that. I was at Microsoft for 7 or 8 years, and then I founded my own policy consulting firm. Ran that for 15 years, and it was during that period of time that really I began to kind of, as happens when you get older. I'm now considerably older. You look at what you want to do and where you want to spend your time. And my wife and I moved to Richmond in 2015, and it became really clear that there's this amazing, rich history across the city, and particularly in Shockoe, but it's not really well understood outside the region. Richmond itself isn't really that well understood outside the region. And, I think part of what really attracted me to the idea of creating an entity that would allow us to recenter Richmond in the national narrative, to position the city and its history, not just in the national, but really the North Atlantic and the global narrative, was really exciting to me. And so that was part of the animating impulse behind the creation of the Shockoe Institute. I should hasten to add that it would never, ever have happened without the enormous catalytic investment of the Mellon Foundation. And Dr. Elizabeth Alexander, who a number of years ago stood up what was then a quarter, now $500 million so-called Monuments Fund, was she and her team were very receptive to the proposal that I was working to develop, that ultimately led to the funding of Expanding Freedom, our permanent exhibition that will open in Main Street Station in the spring, and of the Institute itself.
Okay, so that's I didn't know about the time you had spent going down the road. Who knows? Maybe you'll finish at some point. It's not impossible. It's not impossible, right? Yeah, yeah. So thank you for that background. Tell us about the Shockoe Institute. What is its mission? How does it relate to Richmond while also addressing the wider history of the United States?
Yeah, that was you're framing the question that we were asking ourselves at the beginning of this undertaking. The Shockoe Institute is, as you know, we are a Richmond, Virginia-based 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we are dedicated to revealing the enduring impact of racial slavery on the American experience, and the consequences of that enduring impact. That's our mission per se. The way that mission relates to both Richmond and to the U.S., and as I said earlier, to really to the North Atlantic generally, is what we've really focused on, and as visitors will see when they come to Expanding Freedom in Main Street Station in the spring, we look to take the history of Richmond, and in particular Richmond's role in the domestic slave trade, and to place that in a national and international context. That, I think, is one of the important dimensions that we will add to the conversation. And in so doing, I think really help people understand the centrality of racial slavery to, as you know, the maturation of America, to American economic development, to the rise of America as a global economic power. Part of our mission is to recenter racial slavery in that conversation, as difficult as that may be for many. And so we take a political, a social, and an economic perspective, each of those three blended, to bringing this history to life in, as I said, in Expanding Freedom that you'll see open in just a very few months.
Now, I said to you that before we spoke that I wouldn't veer off anywhere other
You're
than
away.
what we had established.
You're away.
But
You're away.
but you mentioned something just now, and you don't have to touch on it. You can touch on it as much as you desire, but one of the things that I do, most recently, I was the coordinating senior manager for history programming in the Fairfax
Mm.
division, which is the
Mhm.
largest school division in the Commonwealth, and I think top 13 in the nation. And, it's a highly political environment. And one of my jobs was to ensure that we weren't constantly in the news all the time, which
Yeah.
I was successful in
Mhm.
that. But what I mean by that is because it's such a large metropolitan area there. There's a lot of political jarring that takes place between different groups, and so it becomes a very tight line that one has to walk.
Yeah.
So that things aren't misinterpreted one way or another, and you have to be very balanced. And one of the things that made me successful was I always focused on how we as historians do the work of history, the tools that we use,
Mhm.
and staying focused on those skills as
Mhm.
opposed to attempting to promote some ideology.
Right.
When you mention racial slavery and you put it that way as the center of the work for Shockoe,
Mhm.
what pushback have you seen with regard to the current feelings, emotions, um, you know, administrations, leaderships throughout the U.S., state, local, federal, etc. What kind of response do people get when you walk into a space and you're attempting to create partnerships or,
Yeah.
etc.? What's the reaction there? Because I know from doing this work for a long time that it's surgical,
Yeah.
right? And so what's the response there with this being the center of the work? I didn't want to bring something out of bounds, but that when you said that, I was just like, that's a really fine line here. So tell me if you would.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think a couple of important points. First, the most important point that you raised, which is to be first and foremost as data informed and evidence based as possible.
Yes.
Start with the documents. Start with the primary sources.
Hmm.
Start where, as a historian, you are taught to begin.
Hmm.
We are taught how to work in archives. We are taught how to sift through and look at documents and understand the ways in which these primary sources came into being and how they work. I think, and I've been delighted that we've been able to bring in a wide range of historians to inform the work that we are doing. And I hasten to add, a wide range, I think, of quote unquote political perspectives, which is a bit of an overstatement, but historians that come from different points of view. That balance is essential to our success. So first is simply to amplify the point that you made. Data, we are a fact-based, data-informed organization. And so when I go into these conversations, I lead with the following statement. We have nothing to fear from the facts. We have nothing to fear from the facts. If we choose to be afraid of facts, that's a different matter. But from the get-go, we have nothing to fear from the facts. The second thing I say is, I am not here to weaponize this history. I am not here to weaponize this history. We're approaching this work with maturity and candor and generosity. And each of those three words are our guideposts when we have these conversations. What I mean by maturity is this. Countries, like people, have a growth trajectory. They're born, they live, they die. We in the United States are relatively early in our maturation curve, certainly relative to the old world, relative to many other countries. And I think part of the maturation process, and I think part of what we are going through now as a society, is that very hard work of growing up. I think when you think about it in personal terms, you know that point in your life when you looked in the mirror and you saw yourself for who you were. When you were a kid, you're invincible and all the rest. But when you mature as a human being, you see yourself for all of who you are, if you are honest with yourself. Countries are no different. And so I think part of the grappling that we are going through is that maturation process. But we do our best when we approach the work, that data-informed, evidence-based work, with real candor. These are the facts. Here they are. This is what happened in 1607 and 1619 and 1705 and 1964 and 1968. This is what happened. And then generosity. And that's, I think, in some ways, the most important and the hardest work to do when you are sometimes met with a kind of a reflexive hostility or reflexive negativity or something along those lines. You want to invite people into the conversation and keep them at the table. And that's hard, tough work. But that's why I say we're not weaponizing this. Because to get back to your earlier question, part of the work, part of the mission really is to put that history to work. This is all of our history. Okay, we're all in this together. It's not Black history, white history, indigenous history. All of these stories roll up to the totality of who we are and are becoming as a people. And so we're all meant to be at the table. And when we take that approach, I think what we have the opportunity to do is to put that history to work. We put those lessons to work to inform the development of solutions to problems that have emerged from that history. Among the most significant problems that we have is the enduring impact of racial slavery. But I think if we can all take a breath, start with the data and the evidence, agree that we are going to bring our own stuff to the table in this conversation. But if we agree to stay at the table, we can get the work done.
Thank you for engaging with that, and great response, great answer. I think, it's so important, and this is what I work with schools and teachers to do. When I'm consulting, is you can't lead with your personal political ideologies We all have things that we're convicted about, but what's really important is the work of the history,
Hmm.
and so if we can continue to show kids
Yep.
how to do history properly, how do you examine primary, secondary sources? What's the
Mhm.
difference between such sources? At
Exactly.
which instance does a primary source become a secondary source? And primary source can be considered, a secondary source, and vice versa. How showing students how to be able to work through all of that, and then to understand vocabulary, language,
Hmm.
geography, right?
Yes.
Getting folks focused on the learning process,
Right.
because that's what humanizes all of the content, is the fact that whatever we're studying, these are real human beings, right?
Mhm.
These are real people. You can take any individual that you don't like, and you can say, I don't like that guy, I don't like that gal, I don't like their attitude, I don't like this or that. But most of the time, they have a mama that loved them.
Mhm.
They've got brothers or sisters that loved them. They've got children that love them, and they are going to have a perspective about that person that you don't. So what we want to do is find out, hey, I had bad interactions with this person, but for some reason, their husband really loves them, their
Mhm.
wife really loves them, their mom loves them. So how can I understand that aspect of that person? And that's part of the challenge. If,
Yeah.
if if we look at history from just saying, the surface level, and I don't like this stuff, and why are we still talking about this stuff? It happened hundreds of years ago. We're not really seeing the human experience, and that's what we have to bring people back to.
I couldn't agree more. And I think like that when you reflect back on your work and your career and kind of what brought you to this work, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I think one of the reasons that I was attracted to the study of history in the first place is because it was exactly that kind of a doorway, an avenue, a portal, if you will, into really understanding the depth, breadth, and complexity of the human experience. I think that's really what it was about. And so when we use the term shared history, we mean that quite literally. And I think, one of the challenges that we have in the historical profession, and as it has been, for lack of a better phrase, professionalized in the academy, is that we have, I think, lost some of the public dimension. We've lost some of the storytelling, the importance of the storytelling, and getting people invested in their own stories and in the stories of their communities on a day-to-day basis. We've kind of abstracted it from the human experience. And the way that you just described the centrality of the human experience to the historical endeavor, I think is a really, really powerful point. I love the way that you framed that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think that that's how we get the work accomplished.
Yeah.
So Richmond has a deeply layered history with slavery, commerce, urban change, and memory.
Yeah.
How do you see the Shockoe Institute's role evolving in the city during the next 3 to 5 years, as more people become aware of the work? How will it evolve?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that because you're asking, the very questions that our board and our stakeholders are putting to us. If I were to offer kind of one quote that serves as the kind of the animating impulse for our work going forward, it's the MLK quote from the sanitation workers strike in 1968 when he said, "What good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger?"
Mhm.
Why that quote? My hope is that what we will be able to do over the course of the next several years, both as an organization and and in the work that the organization does, is to is to is to bring a kind of a, for lack of a better phrase, an economic development and economic growth opportunity focus to the place we are. As I said, we're in Main Street. We're located in Main Street Station. So I want us to have an impact. I want us to be a positive catalyst in that hyper locality. And I want us to be in the position of providing the kinds of programs and services to school age kids that sit at the nexus of civic and financial education. That's what that quote really does for me. I mean, we think about the evolution of the civil rights movement, but that quote that King offers is it's got to be a both and. Political rights and economic opportunity have to not just peacefully coexist, but they got to be inextricably intertwined in order for us to have the kind of society that we want. My hope is that we will be able to play a constructive catalytic role, particularly from an education perspective, in doing that work. Because remember, we're not a museum. We're not a museum. We're not collecting anything. Right.
Right.
As you said, we're a place of learning, of reflection, and of action. And action is the most important part.
Very good. All right, let's real quick just take a pause for a little opportunity to talk to our listeners about support, and then we'll come right back within just a minute or so. As a listener to the Leading by History podcast, we want to thank you for being a part of this learning community. Without you, there is no us. Consider supporting Leading by History today by 3 simple steps. 1, sharing our podcast. 2, visiting our website at leadingbyhistory.com. And 3, making a donation at Patreon.com/leadingbyhistory. Whichever you choose, know that your support goes a long way in helping us to provide the high-quality programming you've come to expect from us. Thank you sincerely as you support our program and continue to lead by history. All right, and we are back to the conversation. So, we talked about, Richmond's history and how the Institute is gonna work and evolve and engage with the community. I really like the idea of this institute not being a museum, not being something that we just come and we look at, artifacts, etc. And there's a place for that and a need for that.
Mhm.
But I like the fact that we have an institute, which is a space of learning for us to think and to just, be able to share ideas and, learn and grow. And I really appreciate that because I feel like that's something we definitely need in our city is to have a space, a physical location where we can come together, bring some great minds together, and start thinking through some of the history, some of the what ifs, some of the possibilities. I think having thinking spaces is so important. One of the things that I have attempted to implement whenever I was leading a history program was to have an opportunity for the people with whom I worked um, to have an opportunity to think, right? So, one of the things that, I implement in departmental work for employees is that, listen, uh, you folks you have a background in history education, you're running history programs for some of the most influential divisions,
Mhm.
but you're working all the time. And when you get away from work, I don't bother you and don't want to bother you because you need to have a separation between, work and life so you have balance. But
Right.
when do you have time to think about history, education, and models of education and history? And so I implemented something called a brilliance hour with my team.
Nice.
And what I did was I said, look, you're on the clock, you're still getting paid, but I want you to take an hour once a week, and I want you to read some excerpts from one of the texts that
Mhm.
we have, and I want you to start thinking about questions of potentiality, you know, the could be's,
Mhm.
and think about innovative ideas and ways in which we can do the work better.
Mhm.
And I called it a brilliance hour,
I love it.
in which folks are just focused on thinking about their thinking metacognition. And I
Mhm.
don't think we have enough time in work days to do that. We're constantly working and putting out, proverbial fires, being reactionary, but we don't get in the workplace, especially in public and higher education, unless, you're a professor that's writing a text,
Mhm.
and you have time slated where you don't have classes and you're just working on your writing. But I'm just talking about the person that's in there grueling, the adjunct professor,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
high school educator. When
Yeah.
do they have time to be brilliant and think about the work of history? And so that's what comes to mind for me when I
Mhm.
think about your response about the Shockoe Institute. Right. I think like having that kind of space to me just seems like so important.
Well, you are absolutely on point. I mean, we have deliberately built our 12,000 plus square foot space into really kind of two discrete areas. There is expanding freedom, as I said, which is approximately 10,000 square feet of a museum-like experience where you go through and you will see and you'll experience, you'll read, you'll be immersed in different kinds of experiences with the history. But when you come out of that, you will come into what we call our lab. And that lab is where we are dedicated to creating solutions. That lab is where we are dedicated to give people the opportunity to think. That lab is the place where I hope we'll have the opportunity to host you in a live in a podcast. That lab is where we want to convene educators in exactly precisely the way you were describing, so that we can really so that we can take advantage of the I think this enormous need that we have to bring more of our intellectual capital to bear to help kids and students, learners of all ages, people invested in changing their communities with the kind of data informed, evidence based history that will help people see more clearly the way to those solutions. That's why we designed this. We were very, very deliberate in working to create that space to do the thinking, the sort of which you just described.
Mm, I like that. And I look forward to visiting the space, and
Good.
and of course I would thoroughly enjoy doing a live podcast down there, and interviewing folks and having some discussions, and et cetera. I was asked by members of the team some years ago for the Boulevard's change to Arthur Ashe, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
To actually capture that, and it was so wonderful because Leading by History was there, and we were podcasting live there, and I caught Congressman John Lewis's one of his last speeches before he passed on, and it was just really monumental, where he talked about good trouble,
Mhm.
and so yeah, that would be wonderful, and I think that we definitely want to make folks aware, and get our audience down there. We've got the drones and all of that. We can get down there and really, do some things. So I'm excited about that.
Good.
So your I don't want to say motto per se, but you have this phrasing of learn, reflect, and act.
Mhm.
How do you balance those three pillars in practice, especially going from reflection to meaningful action?
Yes. It is important for us to recognize that action will mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It can be something as simple as giving yourself the opportunity, literally building space into your schedule to do the kind of thinking that you were referring to earlier. It could be taking action by reading something that is recommended as part of the book club that we are going to be starting in later this year. Action can mean an awful lot of different things, and so I want neither to overstate it nor understate it. But what I want to make sure of is that we've created the space where people can act constructively in ways that they choose to improve our civic health, to improve our civic life. That's really the goal. Those are going to be the opportunities that we want to create through the learning that will happen in the exhibition space and the reflection that you will have the opportunity to engage in both when you come into the lab and use our content management system, through the interdisciplinary programming, the wildly interdisciplinary program that we intend to offer, through our creative dimension and our founding artistic director, Layla McCullough, who's absolutely wonderful, who will be hosting a program at ICA with some very, very notable artists on November 20th. These are all ways that we're going to give people the opportunity to learn and reflect and to act. So the balance question is going to be up to individuals. We are not going to be prescriptive, but we are going to create an environment, an arena where people can choose which of those three they want to lean into and how they want those three to work together. That's up to the individual. I'm just trying to give them the space to do it.
So this builds on something we talked about a little bit earlier, but it's a little different in the sense that I want to tease out a different part of the conversation. So we talked about the humanity of people and always approaching challenging and hard history by focusing on the commonalities of human beings. But when you're working with communities who might feel fatigue
Yep.
or skepticism around narratives of racial slavery, especially in 2025, what's your approach of making this work resonant for them and forward looking as opposed to what most programming has been, which is, retrospective and looking back and saying, oh, we made some serious mistakes, we shouldn't have done this, human beings should never have been enslaved, and that's good, that has its place, and I think every human being has to have the opportunity to have that conversation. But how do you make this resonant and forward looking for folks who've already done that retrospective work and are now just like, okay, what do I do now? I recognize potentially that my ancestors were harmed through racial slavery, or my ancestors harmed others through racial slavery. But I apologize. I attempt to be a good person and live. But how is this going to resonate with me in a forward-looking way?
Sure. The simple answer to your question is when people, regardless of where they may sit, are at the table and they reach that conclusion, I say to them the following: Don't get up from the table yet. Stay, sit, and let us reason together. Reason together about what? They might ask. We've gone through it. We've done the work. This brings us then to this question of enduring impact. Enduring impact. Now, we use the phrase, and you heard me say it earlier, the enduring impact of racial slavery, the consequences of racial slavery. But when you think about it, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that you've got really a global audience, when you pull back from that, when you pull back from the uniquely American context that is racial slavery, not slavery, we've had slavery for millennia, but racial slavery. When you pull back from that, you say, what is it that racial slavery really is? It is the unique, tragic, awful, horrific American version of what human beings have been doing to each other since we showed up. And that is that we have decided across the globe, different contexts, that some of us are better than others. Some groups are better than others. Some of us are more valuable than others. That hierarchy of human value, and that's what that is. Human beings have created hierarchies of human value across human history. Racial slavery in the United States is the uniquely awful American form. But when you can get people to kind of pull back a little bit, and you think about it in a comparative context, all of a sudden, the issue of enduring impact becomes more clear. It's easier for people to see when you look at it in a comparative context, because they're kind of held harmless from the, this is me, this is here, this is mine, this is now. And when you get people to see the relevance of the enduring impact in different contexts, then you're able to engage them in a solutions-focused conversation. You can bring it back to the here and now, and you can say, okay, look, we've got gaps, we've got health and wealth, we've got all manner of disparities across our population, not just racial wealth and health gaps, but lots of different kinds of gaps. So how do we organize ourselves to solve those? Some of those come as a consequence of the enduring impact of racial slavery, some of them more broadly, the hierarchy of human value. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be solutions focused, if you're going to create a healthier, more vibrant, civic life, then you've got to be on your front foot engaged in solutions making. And that's what I hope we're going to be able to do.
All right. So I think, yeah, if we focus on saying what are the current problems and challenges we face as a society, and how can we utilize this history in order to help solve them? All right, this is going to be a tough question in a sense, um, but maybe not. But I want you to share with me what has been so far, because I know the work is still young, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But what has been the most surprising or unexpected insight you've gained through your work at the Shockoe Institute, one that changed the way you think about this mission?
Well, there have been countless insights. I'll tell you, one of the things that I found surprising was, and I kind of continue to find it surprising, and this surprise fairly early on in the work actually informed the approach that we decided to take, and that was kind of a persistent parochialism to the place and to the subject matter itself. It felt as though there were too few people who understood the truly national, indeed global consequences of what happened in Shockoe. There was a kind of an ownership. I don't want to say it, well, to some degree, I think I was a bit surprised that people feel like it's their story and their story alone. That was a bit of a surprise. But as I started to listen and learn, and there are many good reasons why people feel that way, but what I think that did was it really catalyzed for us the need to to give people the opportunity to pull back and to see Richmond in its more in its more fulsome context. And I hope that we have achieved at least some of that, because when you think about the domestic slave trade in particular, and you think about the over 850,000 human beings who were forcibly removed from the upper South to the lower South, when you think about it just as a statistical matter, there is a very high degree of likelihood that if you are a Black person in Alabama or Mississippi, that you can find your roots, as it were, in Shockoe.
Mm. Mm. So as we are coming down to um, the latter moments of the program, you know, many organizations focus on um, commemoration and memory, right? That's something that's very popular.
Yep.
How do you ensure that you are also driving tangible change, like through policy and education, public space, civic engagement? Can you share some recent examples in which you move beyond, um, just commemoration and memory for the sake of, and actually, are stepping into the realm of change agency?
Yeah, and I can. And a friendly amendment to your question. So we are obviously not, repeat, not an advocacy organization. We are
Correct.
an education organization. That's where I think we have the best opportunity for the kind of tangible change that you're asking about. Policy is for the policymakers. Policy is for citizens, and if citizens want to engage in policy making and advocacy, they should absolutely do that. That's not my job.
Got it.
Yeah, my job is to create an environment, a learning environment that will drive the kind of tangible change that to which you refer. Specifically, where I see us doing that most effectively is in that education space, but making sure that we are working in a manner that is additive, that is complementary. I'm not about wheel reinvention. I ain't got that kind of time. What I want to be able to do is to create a place and a space. Apropos of your earlier point, like where can people come and think? Where can people come to work together, sit around the table, and to develop these kinds of innovative solutions that we need? Again, at the nexus of civics and financial education, per the King quote that I mentioned earlier. So one of the ways that we've started to do that is to convene educators, small groups, larger groups of educators. We were in Alexandria a few weeks ago. We'll be in Charlottesville in a couple of weeks, working and talking with educators and students to learn more about the challenges that they are facing in the Commonwealth context, vis-a-vis the standards of learning and the implementation guides. We want to be a help. We want to be a resource. We want to be a platform for teachers and students and educators of all types to be able to come and work together to do that the work that will lead to tangible change. And how do we measure tangible change? From our perspective, we are measuring it by explaining that our view is that tangible change means demonstrable improvements in our civic life and our civic health.
Mm, mm. Very good. Very good.
All about the one word answer to your question is partnerships.
Right. Right. Okay. So to get into another question, looking ahead, what is the biggest barrier or challenge you're preparing for? And also, right, two-part question, what are you most optimistic about in addressing it? So looking ahead, what's the biggest barrier or challenge that you're preparing for now? And what are you optimistic about in addressing it?
The biggest barrier, to be completely blunt, is money.
Always.
the sustainability of our organization, of our business, is the central challenge, beginning, middle, end. What am I optimistic about in that regard? I am genuinely optimistic and hopeful that when people come to visit Expanding Freedom in Main Street Station, when it opens in April, and when we have our public event on April 9th of 2026, I am genuinely hopeful that people, not just in Richmond, but across the country and indeed around the world, will understand the centrality of Richmond and Richmond's story, and that they will rush to support the work that we are doing, because it is, as you said earlier, tangible, that it is outcomes focused. I think if we can demonstrate the unique value that we are going to add, not just to the city, the region, but to the nation, then I think we'll be in a very, very good position to do the work in the out years, as they say. I'm not operating under any illusions. This is going to be very, very hard. And this environment is as tough as one could ever have imagined, especially given our subject matter. But we're focused on the future. We're focused on creating solutions that are going to help everybody. That's what I'm most optimistic about, that when people see that, they'll be all in.
Right. So one of the things that we always do before we end a show is I always ask our guest to leave the audience with words of exhortation. um, you know, and I want you to, you know, looking into your camera and seeing folks, in Richmond, folks in New York City, folks in Minnesota, folks in as I stated, the Netherlands and Scotland. Just want you to think about what would you say to our audience, and you can choose any of that demographic information to focus on, etc. But what would you leave us with, so that this conversation isn't just a podcast conversation and we walk away and say, "Oh, I heard that. That was pretty cool. I'll check it out in April." What words of exhortation? What do you leave us with? What should we walk away from this conversation doing now?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to give you a few minutes to develop that.
Well, that's very kind. I rushed to accept the offer. Here is what I want folks to do right now. Right now. Take out your devices and follow us on social media. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn. Okay? Do that right now, please. I'll pause to let everyone pick up their phone and do that. Follow us on social media. Please go to our website. Click the donate button. It's really big. Any amount will do. Please go to our website, shockoeinstitute.org, and click the donate button. That is what we need people to do. We need people to put April 9th, 2026 on their calendar and expect to be in Richmond, Virginia on that Thursday morning, where we will have a significant public program. We'll have opportunities for community engagement throughout the day. April 9th, 2026 in Richmond, Virginia at Main Street Station. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, understand that the work that we are doing here in Richmond is a part of your story. I don't care if you're in Saskatoon or Scotland. You can't understand the totality of our social and economic development in the West if you don't understand Richmond's story. Your story, no matter where you are, is related to this story. And as a result, you share in this history. You are a part of the community that is going to create the solutions, no matter where you may be. I want people to understand that they should be invested in their communities, in the work that we are doing, because this is truly our shared history. And if we all think in that way, then the solutions will be local, but the impact will be global. And we will be doing our part to rectify, to remediate, and to repair the enduring impact of racial slavery, not just on our shared American experience, but on the human experience.
Thank you so much for those words of reflection. We appreciate you being with us today, and we thank you. And I look forward to continuing the conversation and visiting with you all, and being able to learn more about this great project and great opportunity. And from we at Leading by History, we say peace. Thank you for tuning in to the Leading by History podcast. We enjoyed being with you today, and we look forward to being with you again soon. Remember, never accept any information on face value alone, but always keep a leveled head and go and investigate the sources. Leading by History. Peace.